had recently the visit of the Ukrainian president to Canada.
Yes.
So what really were the results? What the Ukrainians can expect and what the Canadians should know?
Well, first of all, I mean, when I got to meet President Poroshenko with our Prime Minister, obviously we had our bilateral talks, but more importantly, we got to greet and meet your athletes for the Invictus Games. And the resiliency of your soldiers, your security personnel who then got to participate in the games and go on to win medals. It was actually very inspiring, just as it's inspiring to meet our soldiers as well. But more importantly, when the athletes arrived from Ukraine, they were actually greeted by the Ukrainian community who are in Canada, and they got that warm welcome. So our meetings that we had and discussions that we had is based on a very close ties. We talked about Operation Unifier, our contribution in Ukraine, and we talked about economic growth as well. And we talked about many other initiatives that we can do to help Ukraine and work together. But one thing is for sure, our Prime Minister re-emphasized Canada's commitment to the Ukraine.
And there are now talks, and the Ukraine initiated the idea of having the UN peacekeepers, which could contribute to the solution of the conflict between Ukraine and Russia. So are those things considering, and really in that case, we can expect the Canadian participation? You have your experience in the UN peacekeepers.
Moving forward, we need to look at making sure that Ukraine has its voice and making sure that needs are met. And then once we move forward, we got to talk about the mandate itself, making sure a mandate can actually meet the needs of what's been agreed upon. And then so there's a lot of steps in between before we even get to that stage. But I look at it, if there's an opportunity to bring stability there, I think it should be pursued. But as I stated, cautious optimism.
Ukraine is undergoing a number of reforms, in particular in the security sector. So as somebody with that background and being a Minister of Defense, what are the critical for the reform of the security bloc, which is a very tough?
I have been impressed with the level of work within the Ukrainian Armed Forces, the capacity building that Canada has been providing, and then to see the progress has been impressive. But also, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. Canada will be there to provide the level of support, but I've always stated is we want to make sure is the support can be absorbed as well. So that's why those reforms are very important. But I'm happy to see there has been progress made.
What does it mean, the reforms the help would be absorbed?
Well, if you look at, for example, you can provide a shopping list of things that you need, right? If you don't have the ability to utilize it well, you can bring in a capability, right, and ask for something and provide it. But one is you need to be trained on it. That's the one obviously we know. But then how do you utilize that system? A system itself it has an effect. But within military planning, it's how do you integrate that into the wider structure within your armed forces is so important. The command and control structure. Then you can have the greatest fighting force, but if you can't sustain it, right, you're not going to be able to fight very well. And that's why that sustainment piece, the logistic piece is so important, and that's why the reforms are important. So based on the capacity building as you move forward, it allows you to absorb the additional capabilities and utilize it to the maximum effectiveness. And that's how we're trying to describe that.
Canada is also backing the Ukrainian police reform. Now, you represent a different ministry, yet still, what are also, as we have this background working in police, also what are the critical things in probably changing the mindset, or is it like an equipment, what are the things to reform first for the police being, trusted by their people?
No, as a former police officer, this is something I've been very impressed with in Ukraine, how those reforms in policing have progressed extremely well, where the confidence, you can see the confidence within the Ukrainian population. The police professionalization and the reforms that's taken is critical, because they're the ones that actually deal with the population. and give confidence. And if a population has confidence in the police force, then you have a much greater confidence in your wider security apparatus and agencies. I think the military can learn a little bit also on the police, how the police reforms have gone.
So you mentioned that there is a community base there. You have seen the roots of that.
In fact, I actually met with a retired RCMP officer who actually served in Afghanistan. And so I knew him from there. And so he gave me a very detailed perspective of what was going on. And when he said that he was impressed with the changes, and more importantly, the confidence that it was building with the population, I knew that it was working well. And hence the reason why we wanted to provide greater support. When things are going well, you want to make sure that you can actually provide greater support in that arena. But ultimately, the greatest success really is the population itself and the resiliency that's there. Like if you obviously know this far better than I do, and I got to go to Kyiv for the first time. When you land and you see the normality, skyscrapers being built, you just think you're visiting any other European city. And let alone the challenges that the nation is facing. And the engagement of civil society in Ukraine is also equally as impressive. And how they've taken on this challenge, come together, and being able to volunteer their expertise. And I saw that directly in terms of the technology that's coming in because of the ingenuity.
The Ukrainian community in Canada, there are among a lot of supporters of the Conservative government, and especially for their foreign policy being probably a bit more tough. And now there are talks about providing the lethal weapon by the US, which are more actual than they used to be. So what would be your answer on providing the lethal defense weapon on Ukraine?
Well, actually, remember we go back to our original conversation. If we go back to a shopping list of providing something, it doesn't mean you're going to achieve the aim. What is it? What are we trying to achieve? And that's where I had a really good discussion with Minister Polchak, and him being a very accomplished military general, he understands when if you want to do something, build the long enduring capacity, you need a plan. That's one of the reasons why when we formed government, we wanted to actually put a realistic plan, not just get political checkpoints. We moved with a defense cooperation agreement, which is going to allow now Ukraine to have greater access to a Canadian defense industry. And then we're going to be able to not only create a plan for what the needs are, but then we'll build a plan on the capacity building with our number of personnel that are in Ukraine right now.